Welcome to a place where perfect marriages crack under pressure and the truth refuses to stay hidden. Here, every story pulls you into a world of power, betrayal, and emotional reckoning, where spilled wine can start a war and a single accusation can destroy a carefully built empire. These are not just relationship stories. These are raw, unforgettable journeys through humiliation, status, secrets, and revenge. Watch as quiet suspicions turn into shocking revelations, as love transforms into strategy, and as those who once trusted the most learn how dangerous silence can be. From public scandals in glittering restaurants to private confrontations behind closed doors, every twist will leave you questioning who really holds the power. If you believe the deepest wounds come from broken trust and the strongest people rise from betrayal, then you're exactly where you need to be. The restaurant had always been a place of polished laughter and carefully folded napkins, a kingdom built on quiet power and whispered influence. Candlelight flickered across crystal glasses while strangers leaned into conversations that would be forgotten by morning. That night, every gaze turned at once. A young waitress stormed across the marble floor, eyes blazing with a fury that felt rehearsed yet dangerously real. Before a word could be spoken, a glass of red wine flew through the air and exploded across silk and skin. Gasps rippled through the crowd like a sudden storm. Sticky warmth clung to dignity while humiliation dripped slowly onto the pristine tiles. "He's mine," the waitress declared, voice sharp enough to slice through the music. Fingers pointed toward the office at the back, toward the man who had built an empire on charm and carefully curated loyalty, toward the husband who had promised forever beneath softer lights. Laughter began as uncomfortable whispers. Then came the phones, lifted like weapons. Every second stretched longer than the last, thick with judgment. Rage burned hotter than the wine soaking into expensive fabric. Yet the smile remained, frozen and fragile, as if grace alone could silence chaos. The number was dialed with steady hands that refused to tremble. It rang once, twice, the third ring never caved. He answered with the warmth reserved for strangers and investors, not for the voice that had shared his darkest nights. In the background, a woman's giggle floated through the receiver like a ghost finally given shape. Excuses followed, rushed, careless, insulting in their simplicity. Business meeting, emergency, lies wrapped in polished words he had used too often to notice their cracks. Across the room, the waitress watched, satisfaction blooming where anger had lived just moments before. A silent understanding passed between two women standing on opposite sides of betrayal. This was not a misunderstanding. This was not a mistake. This was exposure. Years of suspicion suddenly aligned like falling dominoes. Late-night calls taken on balconies, unexplained trips, a cologne that did not belong in familiar spaces. The fragile pride he wore like armor shattered in the reflection of 1,000 staring eyes. The wine had stained more than a dress. It had revealed the truth he never believed would bleed into the light. And that night, the war he started finally found its ending. The first splash of wine felt accidental, almost clumsy, until the second wave of accusations followed like thunder after lightning. A crowded dining room froze mid-breath, while crimson drops slid slowly down the curve of a champagne glass, pooling like evidence no one had asked to witness. The young waitress stood trembling, not with fear, but with something far more dangerous, certainty. "He promised everything," she said, loud enough for every table to hear. Fingers curled into fists at her sides, knuckles pale under the glow of pendant lights. Her eyes never left the doorway that led to the private offices, the place where deals were sealed and lies were buried beneath leather chairs and signed contracts. A smile was forced, the kind practiced over years of hosting charity galas and pretending not to notice late arrivals. Apologies were offered to strangers, a napkin dabbed at the spreading stain. Yet humiliation has a scent stronger than spilled Merlot, and it lingered in the air like smoke after a fire. Phones began buzzing before anyone even moved. A family group chat lit up with concern disguised as curiosity. His sister's message arrived first. "Is everything okay? Someone just sent a video." Then his mother called, voice tight with panic and something resembling vindication. The perfect image they had worshipped for so long was cracking in real time. The office door finally opened. He stepped out wearing that same confident grin that had once felt like safety. For a fleeting moment, relief flickered across his face, as though believing the chaos could be smoothed over with charm. Then he saw the waitress. Then he saw the wine. Then he saw the truth reflected in 100 unblinking eyes. The argument that followed was not loud. It was worse. It was controlled, measured. Every sentence peeled back another secret: an apartment rented under a company name, business trips extended for reasons that had nothing to do with profit margins, promises whispered into unfamiliar hair. His voice cracked only once, when denial finally gave way to desperation. But the most devastating revelation did not come from him. It came from the girl still clutching the empty glass. She spoke of a child. Silence swallowed the room whole. And in that moment, revenge stopped being a plan and became a destiny. Status had always been his favorite disguise. The tailored suits, the handshakes that lingered just long enough to command respect, the way servers straightened their backs when he passed through the dining room like a king surveying loyal subjects. Being married to a man like that meant living inside a performance where perfection was expected and silence was rewarded. That illusion shattered the moment whispers began curling through the restaurant like smoke searching for oxygen. At first, it sounded like nothing more than gossip, fragments of sentences floating between clinking forks and nervous laughter. "That's his wife." "No, the other one." "Didn't you hear what the waitress said?" Every stare landed like a bruise, invisible but impossible to ignore. Faces that once smiled with admiration now tilted with curiosity sharpened by scandal. The young waitress stood near the bar, trembling yet defiant, clutching the edge of the counter as though it were the only solid thing left in a collapsing world. Her eyes kept drifting toward the office hallway, waiting, hoping, fearing. The desperation in her expression felt hauntingly familiar, like looking into a mirror that reflected years of carefully buried doubts. The confrontation came quietly, almost politely. He approached with measured steps, voice low enough to suggest control while panic flickered beneath his calm. An arm reached out, not in affection but in strategy, guiding toward a corner where the damage might be contained. He still believed reputation could be saved with the right words, but humiliation had already taken root. A phone was lifted, the call placed on speaker without warning. The silence that followed felt heavier than any accusation. Then came the voice on the other end, intimate, careless, unaware. Another woman asking if he would be home soon, asking if he remembered the anniversary they were planning, asking if he still loved her. The color drained from his face faster than spilled wine could soak into linen. For once, he had no script. Every carefully built illusion, the loyal husband, the devoted provider, the untouchable owner, crumbled in front of employees, investors, and strangers who would carry this story far beyond those polished glass doors. His empire, constructed on charm and secrecy, began to fracture under the weight of truth spoken aloud. And while he scrambled to gather the pieces, something colder than grief settled deep within. Because that night, the power he flaunted finally changed hands. Polite smiles can feel like weapons when worn long enough. That night, lips curved in practiced grace while a storm gathered quietly beneath the surface. Apologies slipped easily to startled diners and nervous staff, every word measured, every movement controlled. Years of standing beside a man who thrived on appearances had taught the art of surviving humiliation without letting it show. But survival was no longer enough. The young waitress's accusation had cracked something open that could never be sealed again. Her trembling voice still echoed through the private dining room where family portraits lined the walls like silent witnesses. They showed holidays filled with staged laughter, anniversaries celebrated with extravagant gifts, children lifted high on shoulders that now felt unfamiliar. The life everyone admired had always been a carefully scripted lie. He entered moments later, bringing with him the scent of expensive cologne and misplaced confidence. A reassuring hand reached out, attempting to smooth over chaos the same way he always had, with charm, promises, and just enough tenderness to confuse truth. For years, that touch had meant comfort. Now it felt like manipulation disguised as love. Dinner continued in strained silence. His parents exchanged uneasy glances. A sister pretended to scroll through messages that were undoubtedly about the unfolding scandal. Even the waitstaff moved differently, their respect replaced by cautious curiosity. The power he once commanded in this room had begun to slip, inch by inch. What he did not know was that the war had already been planned. Weeks of quiet investigation had turned suspicion into evidence. Bank statements copied in the dead of night, hidden property deeds discovered beneath tax files, screenshots saved of messages he believed had vanished forever. Each revelation had hurt like a blade pressed slowly against the heart, yet each also strengthened resolve. The final move came with a simple toast. Glasses were raised. He smiled, thinking reconciliation was within reach. Then the folder slid across the table, thick, undeniable, filled with proof of the life he had built behind closed doors. Gasps broke the fragile calm as page after page exposed affairs, secret investments, even plans to replace the family he claimed to protect. For the first time, fear replaced arrogance in his eyes. Love had once made him powerful, silence had made him reckless, and revenge finally made him fall. If this story kept you on the edge and stirred something deep inside, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next shocking revelation. Because here, every secret has a price, and every betrayal has consequences.